for Borussia Dortmund as they win by 3-1, and that victory means they have qualified. They are through then to the knockout stages. It's all about now who will join them. They will face PSG, so they entertain PSG in the final round of matches. Meanwhile, it's Newcastle against Milan, so PSG, you feel big favourites considering Dortmund have very little to play for. But more on Milan's demise and that impressive performance from Borussia Dortmund. Let's welcome in, shall we? Nicky Bandidi is with us. Nicky, let's just start with the game overall. Brilliant, thoroughly entertaining.
Yeah, a really entertaining game from two teams who basically didn't want to defend, it felt like, for a lot of the game. Certainly some wide open space in the middle of the pitch, neither team controlling the midfield at all. And it really felt like one of those games that genuinely could have finished up with either team winning. Obviously, Milan missed that penalty right at the start with Giroud, and that's its own story. They also had Malik Chow leave the game in the second half through injury, which means their central defence is basically completely void of any healthy players at this point. But they could have won this game. The expected goals you just had on screen showed them actually with more than Dortmund. There was a really great chance for Loftus-Cheek when he managed to beat Hummels, who had a great game at centre-back for Dortmund. And it was 3-1 at that point, and the score was 1-1. And if they took that chance, maybe it's a different outcome. But to be honest, that's the story of Milan's season to some extent, and certainly their campaign in this Champions League run. They've had so many games where you just think if they could take their chances, they could be in a very different spot.
Maybe embarrassing isn't the right word, but certainly disappointing, Nicky, that Milan are in a situation where, of course, just last season, they're in the semi-finals of this competition, and now they're facing elimination in the group stage.
Yeah, I mean, it was the group of death, right? And in the group of death, of course, two teams aren't going to make it. And all of these teams have played some very good football at times in this group stage. Newcastle find themselves in the same position as Milan, despite just playing a brilliant game away to Paris Saint-Germain. It's a tough group, but it's certainly not what Milan were hoping for. Obviously, as you say, they were in a Champions League semi-final last season. And there is this feeling at the moment of, has the project under Stefano Pioli stalled? Which I think they are third in the table. And when you talk about these sort of reactions, it can really feel like an overreaction. But the Champions League was certainly something which the club wanted, the owners wanted, for financial reasons. It's something they wanted. And it's looking very much like they aren't going to make it out of the group now.
Yeah, we hear, Nicky, the word transition, of course, was used a lot in the summer in association with Milan. How patient are the fans with that?
I would say fans' reactions recently have suggested that patience is short, but the club's patience, I think, is not about to run out right this second. I'd be very surprised, unless they start looking like they're going to miss the top four, if we see a change of manager at Milan this season. Whether or not the project is in the right spot going forward after that will be more of an open question, but I don't think the club is in any real rush to make a change.
Meanwhile, Craig, I might be wrong, but when this draw was made, obviously we talked a lot about this group. I'm not sure if anyone would have had Dortmund going through, given how they started the Bundesliga. Yet they seem to, as I said, they saved their best performances for Europe. Is it just there's less pressure?
I don't know. I mean, this performance tonight in Milan was very good. The one in Newcastle was excellent. That looked like it was going to be a huge blow for Newcastle's chances. This group has sort of ebbed and flowed as every time we've sat here went, right, PSG have got this by the scruff of the neck, and everybody else is fighting to get in that second spot and maybe and then into the Europa League. And then it's changed again. And Dortmund have just, obviously they've qualified, they've taken it by the scruff of the neck, and they can control to some extent who else goes through to the knockout with them. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Whatever it is they're doing in this competition, for some reason they cannot seem to take into the Bundesliga on a consistent basis.
Tell me the answer, Stevie.
For once, I think you're right.
Wow.
Honestly. Well, it's not often you're right, but you're right again.
I'll take it.
It has to
because there's no expectations.
It has to be psychologically. You get the feeling when they play in the Bundesliga, they've still got the weight of last season on the back, but you don't get that feeling when you watch them in the Champions League. So, again, congratulations, Dan. You're right for once.
Shaq, do you want to say I'm right as well?
No, I'm not adding to that. Let Stevie tell you you're right.
I don't like Grumpy Shaq. He's still really not after Newcastle. So in theory, Frank, PSG playing against the Borussia Dortmund side, they're already through. This should be fine, shouldn't it?
I'm not sure. It's a Champions League game. They're going to play in front of their fans. So they want to maybe finish the group stage with with something special, and winning against Paris Saint-Germain is always something that you wanna put in your as a trophy. And I would understand that Dortmund would play 100% and give their best. I mean, I see them very organized. I see them working all together, and it would be very hard for Paris Saint-Germain if they keep on playing the way they play right now to beat them. So. If of course Dortmund doesn't want to play, doesn't care, yeah, it will be easy for Paris Saint-Germain. But I don't believe that in front of 80,000, I think, people, they're gonna play a friendly game. They want to win the game, and it's gonna be hard for Paris Saint-Germain. I played many games, well, some games in Champions League, and I remember playing a game at home, and we were already qualified. I remember, Milan players coming to us after the game. We play in San Siro. Say, please. Play 100%. We need to qualify. So, and we did, because we are professionals. So we don't give any favor to anybody. I think Dortmund players will be more than happy to see Paris Saint-Germain out of the competition.
Meanwhile, of course, if Dortmund beat PSG, it's then the battle at St James's between Newcastle and Milan. Nicky, how would you predict that now?
Yeah, I think both teams are just going to have to approach it as they say they're going to, as the managers both did say tonight. You've got to play that game to win it and hope things go your way. Of course, there is also the consolation prize, I suppose, of the Europa League for the winner of that game, even if Paris Saint-Germain do get a result away to Dortmund. But look, that's all they can do is play it as they can. And how do I see it going? I find these games sort of hard to call in this group for the reason I've already alluded to, because our narrative about them, our story of what's happened in these games, in the end, is all defined by the goals. Who sticks the ball in the net? We went tonight from Newcastle recording a hugely famous and significant victory to them getting a draw that leaves them with the power out of their hands for the final round because of a penalty that was completely outside of their control, a decision that lots of us think was a questionable one. Meanwhile, Milan, well, they created the chances all through this group. They could have beaten Newcastle at home. They could have beaten Dortmund away. They could have beaten Dortmund tonight, even though the scoreline doesn't look like it. At 1-1, they had several chances to get themselves back in front, and they didn't. So who's going to win Newcastle against Milan? Newcastle look a bit more ruthless to me at the moment, but on the night, I absolutely don't know which way that's going to go.
What do you do, Shaq? Go back, join Newcastle for this game, make sure you throw in 3 or 4, then you don't even have to worry about Europe, focus on being in the top 4
No,
again.
absolutely. Newcastle and their fans will want to see this journey continue, whether it's in the Champions League or it's in the Europa League. That for me, I think it's still all there to play for from a Newcastle perspective. And yes, injuries may very well play a part in the upcoming game against Milan, but you beat Milan, that guarantees Europa League football. Yeah, on the other hand, I still think there's value to finishing first or second. Of course, PSG beat Dortmund, so Dortmund will want to. They need to beat PSG in Dortmund to guarantee finishing top.
For the head-to-head.
So if from a Newcastle perspective, you're hoping that's Dortmund's approach, that they want to finish top of the group. And in that case, you have the head-to-head on PSG if you both finish on 8 points. So I still think it's there for Newcastle to play for. Newcastle go out, and again, you're left stung by what you perceive as an injustice in this game against PSG. You're going back to St James's Park. We've spoken time and time again about what that atmosphere can be like. And I think you see the best of Newcastle in that game against Milan, against a Milan team who may be willing to down
There's less pressure on Newcastle.
It's a whole lot.
I mean, let's be
lot
honest.
less pressure.
There's a lot of sympathy, particularly within the northeast, of the understanding of the injury and suspension situation. Right, back in the Champions League with the big boys for the first team, and however long it is, nobody really expected them. Let's be honest, with the bare bones to go to Paris and get anything.
Yeah.
Now it looked like they were getting 3 points, but they got a point, which is more than most of us thought they had any chance of getting. And to be able to go to the last game at St James's Park, and it could go either way, I think it's about as good as it was ever going to get for them, bearing in mind the scenario that they're in, and they're just back in the Champions League. And if they drop into the Europa League, as Shaq said, it's not the worst, because that is obviously an avenue still for the Champions League. And that's going to be a tough fight domestically for Newcastle this year to try and get in that top 4 or 5, whatever it is, for qualification next year. So if I was Newcastle, and bearing in mind they play Milan, the pressure's on them, they were semi-finalists last year. Newcastle, if Newcastle don't qualify, they don't qualify. For Milan, it's a bigger disaster.
So prediction then? Who's going through?
I think Newcastle can win at St James's Park if it's the Newcastle that played PSG and not Dortmund at home turn up. But what worries me is what's out of their hands.
Right, the PSG.
The PSG game. Yeah. I'm not convinced by PSG, but it would just, that would be my big concern.
Who's going through, Stevie?
PSG, Dortmund. Yep.
And Europa League?
Newcastle. Newcastle beats Milan. Absolutely.
Oh, there we are. Very confident.